Welcome back to the TwinSpires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hansen to discuss the latest Kentucky Derby and Oaks prep action, mostly at Tampa Bay Downs this past weekend. And James, let's start with the main event, the Sam F. Davis, a Grade 3 event for 3-year-olds. So what were your takeaways from the Sam F. Davis?
Well, the Sam F. Davis at Tampa Bay Downs has never produced a Kentucky Derby winner. Did produce a runner-up in '06 Bluegrass Cat, but hasn't had much impact upon it. Has never had a serious impact upon the Kentucky Derby. And I'll be surprised if it has any impact this year. I give No More Time credit for rebounding a troubled trip in the Mucho Macho Man where he broke poorly. On Saturday, I thought Paco Lopez gave him a terrific ride, hustling him right to the lead by the first turn. And basically, when West Saratoga, who was pressing him in second, he just gave way at the top of the stretch. I thought that left No More Time on a sizable, just a cushion that Agate Road and the rest of the field just could make up. And it looked like to me he was tiring late, but like I said, he held on. The 93% speed rating, is very low, and I'll be surprised if he can run faster or make a serious impact in like a race like the Florida Derby or a major prep, Vance.
Yeah, I agree with most of your sentiments. I very much doubt we saw a legitimate Kentucky Derby contender in the Sam F. Davis. No More Time had attracted plenty of betting steam in that race, going from 10-1 morning line down to 3-1 favoritism. And he was able to hold on to the lead throughout after setting a solid pace, which doesn't exactly speak well of the horses behind him that weren't able to close much ground. The runner-up, Agate Road, was easily second best there and probably goes back to contest the Tampa Bay Derby next month, though my gut says that Agate Road's future still lies on the grass, or perhaps a race like the Jeff Ruby on synthetic if his connections were to prefer chasing a more lucrative race in that respect. But I pretty much echo James's sentiments on the Sam F. Davis and its history of producing Kentucky Derby contenders, Ashley.
It was interesting because this race looked wide open. We talked about this on the jury, James, and Change of Command was the morning line favorite, ended up finishing second to last. And then No More Time was bet down as the post-time favorite and then had that diminishing lead in the final furlong. And Bloodlines, if you look at it, his dam sire is Speightstown, who has produced daughters of Speightstown, have produced mostly sprinters and milers. So I don't know if we're going to see No More Time succeed stretching out classic distances. I thought, though, looking at Agate Road, I actually was a little bit impressed with his late surge coming up to rally and finish second, and had a career best 91%. I believe it was a career best 91% speed figure in a 118 class rating. I think could potentially improve with longer distances here. And even Rapoli Stable said this was their Derby sleeper. So I'm not going to say right off Agate Road. I was impressed returning to dirt and then rallying late to finish second. But
I
Vance,
think if he'd had a little bit of a more forward trip, he would have had a chance because, he still wasn't anywhere close, like midway on the far turn. He was just starting to make up ground, and he really came with a solid run, like you said, Ashley, Agate Road did. But I thought he was just too far back to make up any ground in the stretch. But yeah, that's definitely the Jeff Ruby Stakes is going to be a race like for him. He's got a stablemate Noted, who's a good turf horse. That will always be an option for their connections.
Well, after Fierceness failed as the favorite in the Holy Bull, that was a Todd Pletcher-Rapoli pairing. And then we also had Life Talk in the Suncoast fail as a 2-5 favorite. So maybe Agate Road is the top 3-year-old from Rapoli and Todd Pletcher. And sticking with Life Talk, we had her in the Suncoast and came in last in a field of 5. And then we also had the lost Virgenes as well, where Kinza ended up winning that race for Bob Baffert. So Vance, do you feel like we learned anything about the Kentucky Oaks from either of those two prep races this weekend?
Well, when the Suncoast was running live, I was kind of visually impressed with Power Squeeze, and then I kind of saw that the speed figure came back pretty moderate. So I don't think we saw much out of the Suncoast, to be honest with you. Power Squeeze is really bred to get a much further distance of ground. And I think some of the longer races in the division could be in her wheelhouse, not necessarily the Kentucky Oaks, but maybe the Black Eyed Susan at 1.8 miles. And if she improves enough during the course of the year, maybe the mile and a quarter Alabama. Life Talk ran a dud there. She's been somewhat inconsistent, so I'm a little bit not too high on her Oaks chances at the moment. And of the two Oaks races on Saturday, of course, I think the Las Virgenes was the better race. And the horse to take out of that is the runner-up Copion, who's actually eligible for the Oaks. She kind of allowed Kinza to get away with an uncontested lead in a small field, so we probably didn't get a good gauge of Copion's actual two turn abilities there, but she did run a pretty decent race there for second. It wasn't as dazzling as some of her one turn races that we saw earlier in her career, in her maiden race at Del Mar and at Santa Ynez at Santa Anita. So I'm still a little bit suspect whether Copion will improve, stepping up to a mile and a 16th, mile and an eighth, rather than being perhaps a best around one turn, James.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Copian is the has the most upside for the Kentucky Oaks of any of the horses who are in both the races. You referenced it. I mean, she basically was second the entire way in that Las Virgenes. But if you watch that race, she did try to make a little run at Kinza on the far turn. She tried to challenge her again in the stretch. Kudos to Kinza. She could be a really nice filly in her own right for turning her back, but she did have everything on her own way on the lead. So both those fillies look like they can just keep progressing to me. They're both still nice fillies. So Copian would have some Kentucky Oaks potential if she continues to run well as the distances get longer off that 1 mile race. I'm skeptical about Power Squeeze. Like Vance said, they ran seven. We had 7 stakes races in North America over the weekend. That Suncoast was the slowest of all 7 of them. I really thought. I thought her win in the cash run wasn't as visually as impressive as the Suncoast looked, but I'm still a little bit dubious of how fast Power Squeeze is overall. I want to see her run a fast race before I ever would start buying stock internationally.
Yeah, my takeaway was that I felt like you could write off a lot of horses from this weekend with the Oaks preps. I didn't necessarily feel confident in either. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what I felt about Kenza because can't race in the Oaks, but didn't really feel that confident with Power Squeeze. I mean, came off a 5-length win in the cash run stakes, but the race ratings from this last race and the cash run were pretty light. So didn't face the toughest competition. Life Talk, James, you mentioned wanting to take a stand against her, and we weren't really sure if this was the right spot because I said incorrectly that it was a field of 5. It was a field of 6, and she ended up just not really factoring at all in this race, and turns out this was the race to fade her. And now I think you can probably just write her off going forward. And then had a career worst day too with a 75 Brisnet speed figure and also a career low 112 class rating. So my biggest takeaway here was just, fading Life Talk going forward. And as far as what to do with Copian, I think, watch another race and maybe I'll feel differently, but didn't really feel like I found an Oaks winner this weekend.
Well, Live Talk was on set the pace in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies before she finished 4th, and she led wire to wire easily in the Demoiselle at Aqueduct. So, even with Power Squeeze, she's still a little bit of a stalker who was rating in that spot. Life Talk didn't break sharply. She never ran a step and basically trailed throughout.
All right. Well, James, looking at the rest of the action this weekend, what else caught your eye?
Well, I'm going to do a little rapid fire for what caught my eye over the weekend. First off, I just want to mention Steve Asmussen had Valentine Candy win the 6 furlong Ozark Stakes on Saturday. Booth came back, made his 3-year-old debut in a 6 furlong allowance on Sunday. Both colts won and won nicely, and they really look like talented sprinters, one turn distance types with a really bright future. At Turfway Park on Saturday night, Tennessee, a $1.2 million son of Justify for Windstar Sienna Farm, won his 2nd straight race. Now, Tennessee had broke his maiden the 2nd time out in mid-January by head. He had to work hard to win this 1 mile, 2-turn allowance by about a length, but I thought it was still an improved performance. He's gotten good seasoning in those 2 races. We'll see if he can step it up for Brad Cox and Stakes Company. He might head straight to the Jeff Ruby Stakes off that win. And like I said, he's got something going for him now off of back-to-back victories. And the third thing I'll mention is the Risen Star that is this Saturday. Joel Rosario opted off Track Phantom in the Gunrunner Stakes in December. He rode another horse for Asmussen. He got back on Track Phantom for the LeCompte. But on that undercard, Hall of Fame, a $1.2 million son of Gunrunner, broke his maiden by 10 lengths with Rosario. Both colts are in the Risen Star for Steve Asmussen. I thought for sure, Vance and Ashley, that Rosario would opt for Hall of Fame because I just thought he had the most long-term potential. But instead, he's riding Track Phantom, and Ricardo Santana Jr. will be on Hall of Fame. So I wanted to mention that, Vance. That really sort of surprised me. Didn't know what you thought about that jockey maneuvering.
Yeah, we'll find out after the race whether that was the right move or not for Joel. But so that's something to look forward to. Going back to this past weekend, I wanted to focus on the 9th race at Tampa Bay Downs on Saturday, which was the race before the Sam F. Davis. It was a maiden turf event for 3-year-old fillies, and it resulted in a dead heat between two first-time starters. And of the two, I'm most intrigued going forward by Oversubscribed, who I think is a really good potential long-term prospect. The other dead heat winner, Bell of Rights, was up close throughout, pressing a very tepid pace. Unsubscribed was further back, so she had to work a bit to make up the necessary ground off of that slow pace. But she showed a terrific late kick in the final 16th to come on even terms with Bell of Rights at the wire. So Oversubscribed is an English-bred filly owned by Seth Klarman, trained by Chad Brown. And she is she's from the first crop of Too Darn Hot, who who I was fortunate enough to see early in his career in person over in England. I saw him win the Champagne Stakes at Doncaster. He wound up being juvenile champion in England, and then he was a multiple Group 1 winner as a 3-year-old before retiring prematurely due to injury. Too Darn Hot had 4 Group winners in Europe last year, including top fillies in Ireland and Germany. So he's off to a good start at stud, and it looks like he's got a very really good 3-year-old filly with a lot of potential in Oversubscribed. And I think at some point this season, I wouldn't be surprised if she made the grade herself, Ashley.
Well, real quick, taking it back to the Risen Star, speaking of Chad Brown, he's going to have Sierra Leone. And first I thought, this is going to be Track Phantom or Hall of Fame in the mix here for Steve Asmussen. But now with Sierra Leone in the field, do you give the edge to Sierra Leone, or are y'all thinking Track Phantom or even Hall of Fame with that rider switch? What do you think, James?
Well, I give the edge a little bit to Track Phantom just because of his tactical speed. One thing about it is you sort of we're getting to the point where these jockey assignments are going to come into focus. So I don't know as far as the Derby goes, but I like Track Phantom because he has more speed than horses like Sierra Leone, Hall of Fame, more of a stalker, and even Honor Marie, who won the Kentucky Jockey Club and is coming back and is a contender. He's a late runner. Heck, you got Catching Freedom, who's in that race for Brad Cox off that win in the Smarty Jones. So it promises to be a dynamite race. Ashley, I know you'll be down there in New Orleans at Fairgrounds on Saturday.
Vance, have you had a chance to look yet and make a pick for the Risen Star?
I haven't yet, but I am very intrigued by Hall of Fame. I was very taken by that maiden win on the LeCompte Dander. Really fast performance, faster time-wise and figure-wise compared to Track Phantom's LeCompte wins. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came down to those two. And of the others that you mentioned, Sierra Leone, I am kind of concerned with his closing tactics and Honor Marie's as well. This is basically a stepping stone, and I wouldn't expect those closers to necessarily peak on Risen Star Day. But, the 1.125 distance, they're all stepping up in trip now, and the extra distance could certainly benefit those two closers.
Well, I figured I'd get your all's opinion before I head down there. I'm leaving tomorrow, and then I'll be seeing you, James, on the jury from Fairgrounds. So that'll be an interesting taping of the jury. But yeah, I don't know yet. I really liked Hall of Fame's debut, but I guess Track Phantom's probably the one right now to win and has been doing really well at Fairgrounds. So it'll definitely be interesting. But real quick, from this past weekend, what caught my eye, I'm taking it over to the sprint division, and Sibelius won the Pelican Stakes on the Sam F. Davis undercard for a second straight year. The 6-year-old was coming off a repeat win in the Mr. Prospector, and he followed a similar path to win the Group 1 Golden Shaheen last year, now heading back there again. He's currently in the mix as a top sprinter, but probably still a step below Buffalo, Skelly, Speedboat Beach, and then also the Chosen Brawn who beat him in the Bing Crosby last year. Coming off that Golden Shaheen win, he ended up failing to even, well, he did hit the board in his next start and then didn't hit the board at all in his next two, but seems to be turning it around. And like I said, in the mix for top sprint division, Brisnet speed figures a little low right now compared to some of the others, but still kind of cool to see a horse come back and potentially win those 3 races again back to back. I don't know how many times that's happened in history, but kind of cool to see a horse do that.
I mean, I don't think XY Jet or anybody's ever done that, but yeah, he got real good last winter. Sibelius did, and like you said, he didn't carry it forward, so that's a real challenge for him this year. I think he'll run well in Dubai, given how he ran last year. But I do want to see him come back this spring at Churchill Downs and perform at a better level than he did last year.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We'll be back next Tuesday with a recap of the Risen Star, and check us out on Thursday for our TwinSpires jury with our best bets and faves.